Well, it was a great Saturday night. Everything. Electric, fans, crowd, team for 52 minutes. But unfortunately, the game is 60.
I think you're right, obviously, about all of that, Jay. The other part, too, is that, you know what? It's a bye week. There's a lot more football to play, Todd.
Happy Valley heartbreak for sure. One stinking point. But the Big Ten schedule is just getting underway. There's a lot more ahead. Put that one in the rearview mirror. We're moving forward on the Blue-White Tailgate.
Two of college football's heavyweights went to the center of the ring for the third consecutive year, toe-to-toe. And in the end, this time 1 point separated them, just like 1 point a year before and 3 points the year before that. These are two of the heavyweights, not just in the Big Ten, but in college football, and it showed.
No question. It was, look, if you weren't entertained, you weren't paying attention. And I think one of the great things is the whole world got to see Penn State's environment, see what kind of team they had, because Notre Dame got out ahead of Stanford. The people watching that game started to flip over, and it reflected the ratings.
And for the third straight year, the fourth quarter decides who wins the game. A rally in the fourth quarter does it, and, you know, unfortunately for Penn State, it's the second consecutive year that the Buckeyes rallied against them.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, a couple of years ago, Penn State finished. Last 2 years, Ohio State finished. And here's the oddity. You guys both know I'm a strong proponent of playing with the lead. In the last 3 years, the team that has played all night with the lead has not won the game.
Well, I jokingly said on the show, I said, I hope we're behind the fourth quarter so we win the game. And as it was starting to unfold, I'm like, why did I say that?
Yeah,
you know, so unfortunately, that's the way it shook out.
Well, James Franklin, of course, he'll be the first to tell you, look, this one got away.
This one hurts, obviously. You know, we didn't finish the game the way we should have finished the game. There's no doubt about it. We played a great first half, but weren't able to finish late in the game.
Look, it's honest and direct. I mean, you know, there's no deflection there. He said, look, didn't finish.
No, and you know, the first half was really the key, because that's a half that you really should have come in, I think, 20-0.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different halftime situation than 13-7, where they're in the game and Ohio State comes out, gets that drive, and now you're behind. It's now Katie bar the door.
I'm fascinated by the evolution of these games, too. I thought it was really interesting how they won the toss, took the ball. They stayed aggressive. And I think the game swung and was a little bit different than what the coaching staff thought it was going to be. I mean, it was 14-13 late in the third. Now you got a decision whether to kick a field goal or whether to go forward on 4th and 1. And it just played out, I think, a lot differently than a lot of people certainly thought it was going to be a shootout, myself included.
All right, so let's get to the PSECU pregame update. And, of course, Josh Sperber is standing by. This is brought to you by our good friends at PSECU. Let's go to the update desk and Josh.
Welcome back to the Update Desk, sponsored by PSECU. A pair of award winners for the Nittany Lions this week, and a pair won by KJ Hamler, who was added to the Paul Hornung Award weekly honor roll for the second time this season and earned his first Big Ten Freshman of the Week honor. The red shirt set career highs in receptions, receiving yards, and all-purpose yards, and became the first Penn Stater to win Big Ten Freshman of the Week since Connor McGovern back in 2016. Hamler was taken off of the field after a targeting penalty on Isaiah Pryor, but is expected to return after the bye. Hamler's quarterback, Trace McSorley, also took home some hardware this week, earning himself his third ever Rose Bowl Big Ten Player of the Week award. McSorley racked up over 400 yards in total offense, including 195 yards on the ground and 2 scores against Ohio State. Though he lost out to opponent Dwayne Haskins for Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, McSorley cemented his status as one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten and the country. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, that 461 yards, Josh, by the way, is a Penn State school record from scrimmage. Back in February, and I maintained this all year going in, so my opinion hasn't changed, but I always thought the bye week was perfectly timed. Do you have a different opinion on that, Jay?
Well, it may seem like that before the season, but I think physically it's a good time for a bye week for Penn State. I think mentally you'd like to get into another game right now, because you've got family and friends that are saying, oh, you guys should have won that one. And they're talking about things like play calls and press conference and all that crap. If you have another game, you're ready to go play, and you're talking about Michigan State rather than all this stuff. And I think, hopefully that they get that, just flush that down the toilet. Let's get on to the next game. But you'd like to be in it.
Yeah, jumping into that, I think maybe one more week might work for both of what you guys are saying, both physically and mentally, because they're headed into a tough physical stretch of the season coming up.
Well, Will Fries thinks in the end they'll be better for this.
It's like this is obviously positive, negatives. There's things we did well, and there's things we need to learn from. And there's a lot of things that, as a whole unit, we could have done better. And I think there's things in the game that we did well and we can build off of. So.
Two ways to look at the schedule now. Here's what they have coming up. One is obviously tough. That's obvious. But two, they have the opportunity to make up for it based on this schedule, too. You can make impressions by who they play in winning these games.
Well, the next 5 are going to be the key for them because you've got Michigan State is ranked. You go to Indiana, who's playing well, and then you've got Iowa, and you've got at Michigan, and then you've got Wisconsin. So there are some physical football games. Unfortunately, they're all back-to-back-to-back-to-back. So you have to really be smart at how you practice.
Well, coming up, we'll take a look at the Nittany Lion offense, and we'll talk about Trace McSorley as we continue after this. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at the Penn State defense, and we're just going to get right into the drive of the game. The drive of the game happens in the fourth quarter of this game. And after a great punt by Blake Gilligan, pinned them at the 4-yard line. Jay, the screen game saved them all night.
That was a great call. When you have a team rushing the passer as aggressively as Penn State was, those bump screens, the tail running backs are really, really effective to slow that down.
Just enough of a running game here with Mike Weber. And then the pass play, there's another run by Dobbins. So you do just enough in the run game to keep them honest. And then you go back outside to K.J. Hill. Their receivers played really well. But again, that's a typical pass. What are 2 of those passes? They're both behind the line of scrimmage. He was 12 of 14, and Hill took it home from there. 12 of 14 on passes behind the line of scrimmage. He was only 10 of 25 downfield.
Yeah, and that's a tribute partly to what Penn State was doing up front and putting some pressure on them. And very similar to what TCU did. A lot of movement up front with that big Ohio State offensive line gave them some problems.
And that was the adjustment that they made at halftime because Penn State was owning the line of scrimmage and forcing them to quickly 3 and outs in the first half. And so immediately they came out in the second half and started to attack the edges and get it away from the middle of the line.
And 2 sets of wide receivers on each side really block well. Both teams. I mean, quickly, let's look at the fourth quarter numbers here. And you can see what they did the rest of the game, and then, of course, the fourth quarter. And I mean, for Ohio State, it was enough to win the game. So, there's the numbers right there. Okay, our Blaze Alexander Defensive Players of the Week. And we decided to go with 2 Players of the Week presented by our good friends at Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. And one is Sharif Miller, and the other is Cam Brown. And you see Cam Brown downfield there. Brown's length made a difference, but the length of Young on the other side also made a difference in this game. And then there's Sharif Miller, who blew up a 4th down play. Everyone forgets Ohio State had a 4th down play blown up.
And see, it's our show, so we can add the S and make it plural.
That's
Players of the game. And Cam Brown, I think he's really growing into a good player.
That's the 4th down play.
Yep, right there. The defense is growing up rapidly. Remember the concerns after the App State game, and look, they've been shutting teams down for the majority of the game. Yes, they tired and they didn't tackle well in the fourth quarter, but I think anytime you look at the defense and you say Cam Brown or Sharif Miller, these guys are growing. And we said, look, they keep them under 30 points. I like our chances in this game. They did their job. They did exactly that. They looked really, really sharp for the majority of this game.
Yeah, I know. But again, Jay, I'll retouch on it again. But the wide receiver blocking on both teams. McSorley has his night in part because of the wide receivers. They have their night coming back in part because of their wide receivers. Yeah,
when you look at the big touchdown pass that they had to get them the first touchdown in the fourth quarter, receivers from Ohio State will run downfield making blocks, and that puts a lot of pressure on your secondary. But Penn State's receivers did the same thing too, and I thought that was one of the really impressive things both teams did.
I know the 2 of you are so excited about grades, but we have to wait for that because John Reed did his part during the course of this game. Robert Windsor also played well. Josh Sperber, what about John Reed and Robert Windsor?
Guys, a big story coming into the season for Penn State was John Reed coming back from an ACL injury.
John's a perfectionist. He's like that in school. He's like that in football. It's really important to him, and he works really hard at it. But I think there was a little bit of rust on him, and we were able to chip some of that rust off. And I think John's going to have a huge year for us.
Reed has clearly shaken the rust off with a pass defended in each of his last 2 games and a season-high 3 tackles in a loss against the Buckeyes. His fellow cornerback Amani Oruwariye is clearly not surprised by the reemergence of John Reed.
I mean, I know what John's capable of doing. He's been doing it for years, and the moment's never too big for him, for any of us, and I think he stepped up just like he needed to.
It might not have been enough against Ohio State, but there is a lot of leadership and talent on this Penn State defense, and Robert Windsor knows that this season is far from over.
Well, it was positive. Like, obviously we didn't get the result we want, but we're not going to let this decide our season. Like, look at 2 years ago, we were 2-2. We come back to win the Big Ten championship. We lost by 1 point tonight. Basically just trying to put the message, like, keep our heads up. Like, our season's not over. We're still coming back with a vengeance.
1-point losses are always tough, but I believe that Penn State has the potential to bounce back and contend in the Big Ten. Guys, back to you.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate that very much. All right, let's put the grades up, and then we'll talk about Brent Pry as part of this, because you guys ended up grading.
Sure.
And the enthusiasm with which you graded, I was impressed by.
I hate doing this.
But I know, and I understand that. But let's just talk about, in total, Brent Pry, because he's the one that had to go to work this year and had to replace 8 starters off of last year's defense.
Well, that's a challenge, especially so many guys up the middle, where you're going to have to stop the run, and the linebacking core where experience is so important. So I think they've done a really good job so far of getting the most they can get out of these guys. But there's a lot, like I said, there's some big sledding coming.
You mentioned the youth. I mean, look, a good part of the first part of the season is still teaching and developing, your players, and then taking the film and dissecting it. You grow the most from game 1 to game 2, and you continue to grow and teach from there. And so you hope that they get comfortable at some point with schemes, and you don't have to do so much of that. You can go out and let them play a little bit more instinctively.
So let's take the 3 primary units. We'll start with the defensive line.
I think the defensive line really did a great job the other night. I mean, it's been one thing of a concern with the rushing attack. They were vulnerable early in some of the games, but look, Ohio State's got a great rushing attack, and they pretty much shut them down. So it's definitely a unit that is growing with a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, and I think they've been able to get pass rush when they've needed to. I think you look at the Illinois game and some of the games. There's been some holes where they haven't kept the linemen off the linebackers. So both of those units, I think, both the defensive line and linebackers have some work to do.
Yeah, you referenced the linebackers. That was the area going into the season people wondered about. Have you seen growth in 5 games at linebacker?
I think we saw some growth Saturday night. There's no question. I thought the Illinois game was kind of a step back. I thought the linebackers did some good things, getting depth in their drops to take away some of that stuff in the middle Ohio State likes. And Ohio State didn't take advantage with some of the crossing routes that they normally have, but I thought they were much better in pass coverage.
And I think they're playing faster. You know what I mean? I think they're not thinking quite as much. They're just going. I mean, Micah Parsons looked quick. Cam Brown, they were around the ball a lot.
And Todd, 4 new starters in the secondary. How have they held up?
Well, I think they've done a really nice job. I mean, they did a good job in coverage. I'd like to see them create some more turnovers. At a certain point, that the interception for Garrett Taylor was big in the Ohio State game, and I think moving forward, they're going to need to create some more turnovers.
All right, so let's look at the overall grades for how they posted them up here. And so those are the grades that you guys put down, which means to me that you see potential and room to grow.
Oh, no question. Look, as a former coach, you always think there's something more you could do, and you always focus on the 1 or 2 things guys aren't doing. But like I said, I think there's a lot of room here.
All right, coming up the offensive grades, I'm curious about the McSorley grade. All right, welcome back. And for the Penn State offense, there were other opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of great things to say about the offense, but there were also opportunities, especially early in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the red zone, couple of red zone opportunities in the first couple drives, and they come away with 3, then come away with 3, miss a field goal. I mean, this could have been a 20-0 game at halftime, but overall played really well outside of third down.
So some plays for losses. We were discussing that set them back, and then on third down, some issues on third down. We're also just talking about that too. But they moved the ball. They just didn't put up the amount of points that they normally put up, and we're spoiled seeing them punch it in the end zone all the time. 9 touchdowns in 2 games in a row, and they needed to score more touchdowns. They just didn't do it.
Right, yeah, and that's about, you get into games like these, you need touchdowns, not field goals, if possible. And the big one was the Garrett Taylor interception. Great play. They got 3 out of that and not 7. When you start looking at these minute things that, hey, look, that's where you talk about finishing. Now let's get to the Blaze Alexander Offensive Player of the Week, brought to you by the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. Now, after an extensive vote and a tiebreaker,
puzzling,
we went to Trace McSorley, who set a school record with 461 yards. You saw the JaJuan Johnson play. That's KJ Hamler. Hamler went out after that play. And McSorley, a career-high 175 yards rushing in this game. And the touchdown pass to Pat Freiermuth to put them in front. At that point, I don't know if you can ask one person to do much more than he did.
How about just lowering the shoulder, too? I mean, lowering the boom on the Buckeyes. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, just what a competitor. And I'm going to miss watching him play. Just enjoy watching Trace McSorley play football for Penn State this
Actually,
season.
Urban Meyer disagrees with you. He will not miss Trace McSorley playing for Penn State.
Great respect for our opponent. That was a real one. That was a very talented team, and that quarterback. I just always tried to do that. If you guys notice, is always I talked to Coach Giano today that McSorley is a war daddy now. That's his competitive guy, and like I said, I don't know him personally. Competed against him for several years, and so very competitive player and great player.
He is that. I mean, I think that summed it up. I mean, that's the kind of respect that you would expect after watching a performance like that.
Well, after having been season ticket holder since 1973, I've seen a few games at Penn State occasionally. That's as good. That ranks among the great individual performances that any one guy has had at Penn State. And I hope that fans want to complain about play calls and post-game press conferences and all this other stuff. I hope years from now they'll remember the way he played that Saturday night, as opposed to all that other stuff, because it was really something.
He's just a pleasure to watch. I mean, what else do you want from the guy that he delivers on the field for you?
Yet he could have had over 500 because, as we know, there were a couple of drops along the way. And look, JaJuan Johnson made one of the signature catches of the season without question, but he's also not happy about the ones he missed.
Wide receivers, we have drops. That's just for anything. I mean, just like chasing perfection and being great from elite. We're going to have drops just like anything. Quarterbacks are going to miss their reads. Quarterbacks are going to miss their vision reads. It just happens. It's all a part of the game. Drops are going to happen. Missed plays are going to happen. Missed blocks. Things happen. And one thing we got to do is just be resilient. Next play mentality and move forward.
That's about what you have to do. Just go out. That's what you got to do.
You're going to have drops, but when are you going to have those drops?
Right.
Really dictates what happens a lot in your season. And some really critical key drops. First drive of the game. Later on, Brandon Polk getting get turned around, didn't catch that one. I mean, these are points that are being left out there in the most important regular season of the game of the year, at least, as it's proved out with Ohio State.
Look, this is the kind of game where everything becomes
magnified.
A big thing.
Yep, magnified.
Right? That's just the way it is because they're both that good. Look, these are two of the best 8 teams in the country, period. Okay? Period. 2 of the best 8. Now the question is, out of that 8, who makes the 4? Right. Well, this was a playoff game in a lot of ways, and that's thus obviously you've got to look at all these little things that come up because they swing the game one way or the other. All right, so now we get to the grades. We're going to put the overall grades up first, and you can see. Todd, why only an A on McSorley?
I want to explain that because I think if Trace graded himself, he would give himself an A because it didn't win the game. And Trace is all about winning and winning and winning. I would give Trace McSorley an A++++. But I think Trace would give himself an A because they didn't win that game. And I thoroughly enjoy watching him.
Yep.
He can have whatever grade he wants from me. But I picked that because I think that's how he would grade himself.
But I factored in Sean Clifford's 5 for 5 for 800 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Oh, I missed that.
So I gave me A+. Yeah. But the running backs, I gave him a B. Part of that was the fumbles. I was probably a little hard to wide receivers to see because of the drop passes, because there's been a number of them. And I think the offensive line is better, but I think they've got some room to grow.
that's the unit that they're going to need to lean on, I think, for
Yeah.
the rest of the year. I mean, how are they going to be able to control the line of scrimmage in Big Ten play when it gets physical week in and week out?
And see, that's the part where you do get spoiled by Saquon Barkley in that he went the last 21 games of his career and did not fumble. Like, did not put the ball.
Pretty good.
I mean, and I don't mean
Somebody should
fumble.
draft him high.
I don't mean fumbled and recovered his own. He literally did not fumble the ball once in the last 21, 22 games he played. You know, Slade had 2 in the rain, okay, and then this, of course, that was a pivotal play on Saturday night. Something that's tight ends are factored in with wide receivers. What do you think about Pat Fryermuth and what you've seen in the initial
He's
impression?
a smooth receiver, very smooth out there receiving wise, and I look for him to get more and more involved in the passing attack. I mean, he becomes another weapon for McSorley, and we talked about third down conversions. I think they're going to start looking his way a little bit more when it comes to be third and shorts and third, 5 and 6.
And Ricky Ronnie?
I think they've done a good job with losing the guys they lost, but we're going to find out how good a job they're doing in the next 5 weeks because it's going to get a little steeper defensively.
Yeah, I mean, no question. I mean, they've done a great job. I mean, offensively, they've been explosive. I think Ricky, for the most part, dialed up the right stuff when they've needed it. No doubt about it. All right, special teams is a key component. It was important on Saturday night. We'll talk about that after this. And we welcome everyone back, and time now to delve into special teams. And once again, our crack staff, after pulling Jay and Todd aside, said, give us some grades on special teams. And Todd and Jay, with incredible enjoyment, put together these grades for special teams. So let's get into it. The place kicking grade, this is a true freshman who's 3 of 6 so far this year. I'm sure that factored in so far because it's such a small sample size for him at this point.
Yeah, so I just gave him a C and figured,
I have new respect for my ex-teachers and stuff. It's tough to make these grades and all that good stuff. But look, he's certainly made a lot of extra points, that's for sure. And but look, he doesn't get a lot of opportunities with field goals. Think about that. They're through 5 games. He's had 6 attempts for field goals. He's made 3 of them. They went away from him on a potential 41-yard field goal attempt because they knew they wanted some touchdowns. He kicked off the right hash pretty much the whole game against Ohio State. So I think Jake Pinniger's got a lot of potential.
Oh, he does.
And that's not easy to make a kick in that situation. He put 2 of them through.
I like him because as time goes, that grade's going to change. He's
no
a good
question.
kicker. He gets that ball in the air fast. I mean, up fast. Very hard to get to and block. He's pretty good. Now let's get to the next part. That's kick coverage. This will be Rafael Checa in combination with the cover guys.
He's he's progressively getting those touchbacks. Yep. I mean, you can't run it back if you can't return it, right? I mean, nothing's going to happen for a return. And we saw what happened at App State. So, we're trying to avoid that again.
That's the one blip in the grades that I would give him is just that App State one.
Yeah, exactly. Now we get to punt coverage. That means, of course, let's start with Blake Gilligan. I mean, Gilligan has been one of the top punters in the country. He had some good moments on Saturday night, like pinning them at the 4-yard line. You can see what he's done so far this year. And the number he's popped inside the 20, inside the 5. I mean, he had pit pin back all night long. Chrisman, though, on the other side, to his credit, had an unbelievable night punting for Ohio State.
Yeah, and you look at what the punt coverage team has done. They have flipped the field. Their net punting is very, very good, and that's been critical in some key games for them. And the same thing with kick coverage, and I would say kick returns. They got some big plays like kick returns. So those units, I think, are doing what they're supposed to do.
I just need to mention that Chrisman can kick a spiral better than about 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I mean, it was unbelievable how he just turned that ball over for extra yardage. But Blake Gilligan, no complaints. I mean, the guy's just he does a great job. He's some of the kicks haven't been the longest, but as far as pinning them down inside the 20, there's not many that are better than him.
I think the statement on KJ Hamler as a kick returner was in the Kent State game, where with under a minute to go in the half, Kent State kicks the ball out of bounds, and Penn State says, no, re-kick it instead of taking it at the 35-yard line because they thought he could change it. He got them 22 extra yards.
And he's electric. And how about the one where he said, I'm not going to just kick a knee, I'm bringing it out.
I'm stopping,
well.
I'm going. I'm going.
That's right. I'm going back out. So, Yeah, the guy's electrifying. Anytime he's touching the ball, something's good's going to happen most of the time.
They neutralized DeAndre Tompkins because of the height of the punts the other night. I mean, but for the most part, when Tompkins is back there, what's your confidence level on him?
The most important thing is he's going to catch the ball. He's sure-handed, doesn't turn it over, and that's the first thing. But he has the ability to make the first guy miss, and that's critical in punt returns.
I think that's a great point about the sure-handedness, because you assume the ball's going one place, and then to catch it as you're backpedaling with those kind of kicks is not easy. Your eyes are bouncing up and down. You got to stay flat-footed somewhat to see the ball all the way through and do the first job as they're coming down on you. He's not quick for a fair catch either. He's more than willing to.
There were a couple on Saturday like, what are you?
I mean, but the single most important part about a punt return is catching it.
Yes, because
right?
you don't let it roll and you don't fumble it.
Right, and then after that, then it becomes the feel for the punt return. But I mean, you got to catch it first. There's a bottom line to it. How many times do we see like, oh yeah, and all of a sudden it goes through and now it changes the entire game? Yep. Phil Galliano is now the new special teams coach at Penn State. James Franklin, like your father, put a huge emphasis on special teams, knowing the importance of it. How important has that become in the evolution of Penn State football?
Well, I think they put their speed on the field. They've got some young guys playing, and I think that they seem very, very well organized. You don't see a lot of uncertainty, guys coming in, guys coming off, and they're not taking timeouts, which is a key thing in the special teams play, and they've gotten some plays that have helped them win games.
We mentioned they got off to a rough start against App State, but they've shored things up for there. And I like the fact that the special teams group is not just, go to the side. It's a major component of what's going on in the program, and they have a major effect in the result of football games.
I think the part of that, too, is that in the bounce back from scholarships, they've been able to inject so many athletes into the program, and you're seeing those athletes now show up on special teams. I think it's made a big difference for them along the way. It really has, because look, when they were going through everything, they had a lot of walk-ons on special teams because they had to. Yeah. You can see the difference that it makes. All right, we go to the film room with Todd and Jay after this.
Welcome back to the Blue White Tailgate. We are inside the film/dry erase board room. Jay Paterno with a request, an equipment request that we go to the dry erase board. Of course, it's brought to you by Beer Belly's Beverage. Okay, situations for coaches.
It's a situation room.
There you go. It's a situation room for this week. Situations on the football field. They don't happen. Decisions have to be made like that, even though it's easy for everybody at home to say, oh, why didn't they do this or why didn't they do that? And that's, that's all healthy debate for college football. Couple of 4th and 5 situations. The one everyone's aware of late in the game, of course. Yeah. That's right. Everybody's second guessing the play call of the run that didn't work. There was another 4th and 5 situation, though, that you think is interesting to discuss, too. And so we'll start with that one.
And I think what we want to do today is just kind of show you at home, look, there are situations happen in the game, okay? And what we're going to talk about is going to take us 5 or 6 minutes. But in a game, you've got about 10 seconds as a coach to say, hey, we're going to punt, or we're going to go for it, or we're going to do this, and communicate that to coaches, to players, get the right personnel on the field, make a play call, make things happen, and have something happen. So let's take a look at the first situation. 4th quarter, Penn State's leading by 5, 4th and 5 at the Ohio State 37, 4:45 to go, 3 timeouts, and those are all key factors. So let's take a look at it. Here's situation 1. Now, obviously, number 1, we can punt the ball, pin them deep, okay? Number 2, you say, we're going to go for it. And number 3, hey, let's try a field goal. Now, the punt one, you punt them down, you pin them in there, and you play defense. You got a 5-point lead, and you figure, our defense has played pretty well most of the game, but are they tired? There's all these factors. What's the weather?
Who's kicking it?
Who's kicking it? You got a guy punting Gillikin, who's going to put it in there. So that's a good option. Do we go for it? Okay, yeah. Everyone's, go for it. Go for it on 4th down. Well, if we don't make it, Ohio State's got the ball at the 37-yard line. They've got a short field to take the lead, and they've got 3 timeouts. So that, you want to be aggressive, you want to do that, but you say, you know what, I'm going to play the percentages. Or you say, get a field goal. Well, you're struggling with a field goal. At that point, it's a 54-yard field goal. So you got to start to take into account our kicker may not have the confidence that we want. Again, if you don't make it, Ohio State gets the ball out there. So, you look at that and you say, okay, let's punt the ball. Let's see what happens. And they put them down inside the
From a decision standpoint, it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
They pinned them down inside the 5-yard line. With the way the defense was playing, that's the right call, and it certainly was the right situational choice that worked out.
And people say fake the punt. Well, Ohio State's not dumb. They know the ball's the 37-yard line. So they say, hey, play punt safe, punt them in there, so let's play the fake. So those are things that go into it. And you see, we just took a minute 30, but those are things you've got to think of. And all the analytics in the world, and all the printouts you get can say do this, this, and this, or that play, but they don't know that this guy's hurt or the wind has changed or what the weather is. So let's take a look at probably the aforementioned more.
Yeah, that's
the decision most people are talking about.
There's been some people chewed on this situation for sure.
A little too much. That's why you wish you had a game this week so they could stop talking about it. But let's look at the situation. You're down 1 point. You got 4th and 5 at the Ohio State 43-yard line. There's 1:16 to go, and you have all 3 timeouts. So 3rd and 14 to play before McSorley runs for 9 yards. It's 4th and 5. Now, there are some situations where a staff would say, we've got our 4th and 5 play ready to go. We're going for it. We're running it. We don't take a timeout. So that's one of their options, is to call a timeout. Penn State chose to call a timeout. Once you make that timeout decision, now you've crossed into a little bit different situation because you only have 2 timeouts left. And if you don't make it, Ohio State has the ability to run the ball down to about 30 seconds before they have to punt it. Now, that said, if you decide, when you take a look at that situation, say, okay, one option nobody's talked about is punt.
Yeah.
You've got 3 timeouts. If you don't take the timeout, you've got 3 timeouts. You punt them inside the 5 again, like Gilligan is, and your defense stops him. You get the ball back around midfield, and there's 50 seconds to go, and you got a quarterback that's done this before.
Reason why they probably didn't talk about that very much is because that very same scenario came up and it didn't work out, and they went right down the field. So most people would erase one as a choice, but it is a choice.
No question, and that's a factor. You go, how's my defense playing? And if you look at how they were struggling a little bit in the 4th quarter, so that probably erases that right away. In terms of you say that. Now, if you've got the defense you had the last 2 years, that's veteran experience, you probably say, you know what, punt them down there. We're going to get the ball. We're going to put it in McSorley's hands and win the game. Number 2, go for it, which is what Penn State ultimately did. So now you got a chance. Okay, we're going to go for it, and in 10 seconds you say, well, you call time. I get a little more time, but you got to make a decision as to not only are we going to go for it, but what play are we going to run. And the third option that a lot of people have said, why didn't they kick the field goal? Again, you're a long field goal. You know, that's a 60-yard field goal, and that's a hell of a run. It's very, very difficult. We had to do that once against Ohio State in 2003, and we almost made it. But again, we didn't make it. We lost the game. So, you know, you get to that point where you call a timeout. I think the one thing that probably got a little askew for Penn State was they called the timeout, Ohio State called the timeout, and then Penn State called the timeout, which then put that game into you don't make it.
Yeah, everything's relying on that play. So they did the combo 2 and 4, but they went to number 4 a second time.
Yeah, and you know, you can debate what they called, and that's not the important. What we want to talk about is just all that discussion we just had out loud.
Yeah.
That's got to go on during the week, and then in a 10-second standpoint on the sideline with all those people, a decision's got to be made, and that's where analytics is now in your rearview mirror, and you've got to take into effect weather and injuries, and you know, Ohio State's got a guy that's ejected for a game, or Hamler's out of the game. So all those things go into it, and that's how difficult it is to make those decisions within 10 seconds.
Guess what? You're out of time.
I know.
You had to make your decision.
We're run.
There you had it. We got to get out of here, right? So there you have it. So interesting stuff. Thanks, Jay. All right, Blue White Tailgate, more is on the way as we discuss the keys to the rest of the season.
Welcome back to the Blue White Tailgate, and we have our Ace Hardware of State College presenting Shop Talk. Here, I'm joined by Audrey Snyder, a writer for The Athletic. She's been covering Penn State for a long time. Audrey, thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate you coming out.
You got it. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, a lot of, not as much happiness in Happy Valley right now. A tough loss against Ohio State. I mean, I saw the article you wrote about those takeaways. Why don't you break down something that you took away from that last game?
There was so much to take away from that one. I mean, I think you look at it, the way Penn State had that game won in so many different ways, and the fact that they just got away from it. And people in this town, around the country, are going to look back at that 4th and 5 play and wonder for years why they took the ball out of Trace McSorley's hand. And valid criticism. I mean, Penn State was on board with the call, but you just look back at it, and they hadn't been able to run the ball into the teeth of that defense all game. But hey, they did it. But really, that game could have been won in so many other areas. Drop passes have been a problem through these first 5 games. Tackling has really cropped up, and that's been problematic as of late, too. So Penn State has yet to really play that complete game on all 3 phases, and against Ohio State and these elite teams, especially in the Big Ten East, you can't have lapses like that.
Yeah, you mentioned drops as well. That's been a problem all season, not just in Ohio State. They have 17 drops so far. When we have a quarterback like McSorley who's slinging well, but his receivers are dropping the ball, I mean, what can you really do to kind of improve his elite status with that going on?
You can. I mean, you have to keep going to these guys. And I think during the bye week, Penn State's coaching staff will have some decisions to make in terms of guys like Justin Shorter, JaJuan Johnson, 2 true freshmen that we've heard a lot about. Do they take on bigger roles from here on out? Because right now, the drops aren't just isolated on one guy. It's not just JaJuan Johnson. I mean, we've seen Brandon Polk. We've seen the tight ends at times struggle with that too. So where do you go from here if you're Penn State in this receiving core? I think will be really interesting. Maybe we'll probably continue to see more of Mac Hippenhammer, another young guy. But absolutely, they've got to clean these things up. And at what point do you keep saying, okay, we have to do the same things, we have to improve the fundamentals, but when that actually translates, that's what I feel like these first 5 games have really been about.
Yeah, and you saw after practice on Wednesday, JaJuan Johnson, Mac Hippenhammer staying nice and late, really focusing on those drops. But this whole season has kind of been a familiar commentary for Penn State. I mean, you've been around a lot of these games, a lot of these big losses. How does this one really stand out from other games like the Ohio State game last year?
You know, as a sports fan, I always think it's easier when your team gets blown out. In the moment, it stinks, it's terrible, but that's easier to accept than what happened against Ohio State when you have that lead and then it just unravels. So I really think that recency bias was a factor here, because I was asking fans, I ran a poll on Twitter and said, okay, which of these Penn State losses is the worst, the most painful for fans? And they went with last week's game against Ohio State, but really all of them, I mean, for various reasons. You look at USC because it's the Rose Bowl, but then you say that's a team that overachieved, so they were just kind of happy to be there. Then you look at Michigan State last year, a byproduct of losing to Ohio State the week before and just snowballed. So yeah, they have not gotten blown out with the exception of that game in Ann Arbor a few years ago. But yeah, it's been a lot of tough losses for Penn State fans to swallow here.
Yeah, and it was hard for Coach Franklin as well. I mean, we saw on your Twitter the little minor dust-up he had with one of the fans. You were front and center for that whole issue. Can you kind of explain to everyone what really went down then? Yeah,
so I typically shoot video as the team leaves the field every week, and just so happened this week that James Franklin, as he's exiting, fan in the student section in the front row, starts off by saying, "I love you, Coach, but I didn't like the play call regarding 4th and 5. James Franklin turns around and starts to turn toward the fan, and the kid says again, "I love you, Coach, but..." On the list of things that fans could have and should have said, that shouldn't be something that a coach goes over the top about. I mean, let's be honest. Fans were irate. They were irate about that loss. They were irate especially about that 4th and 5 call. That's not a good look. You're the head coach of this program, and we've seen James Franklin be so measured time and time again. You take that scene and then you go into the media room where he says, they're a great team, but they lost to an elite team. They're not elite yet. And this was the first that we really saw James Franklin be at least that spirited, that emotional publicly. He's an emotional guy, but we hadn't seen that side of him before.
And this week he's really trying to move on from it. A lot of things he's doing in the bye week is focusing on recruiting. We just saw in the Clearfield game on our Game of the Week the new Penn State walk-on commit, Isaac Rummery. Can you talk about some of the recruiting that Penn State's been doing to try and improve their team?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of where college football is always crazy, where you have to keep going. You have to keep moving forward. So the coaching staff then sits there Sunday. They're breaking down film with prospects. Monday, they get a tight end pledge, kid from West Virginia, who has really a lot of intrigue when you look at Brenton Strange at 6'4", kind of that hybrid guy. So you get him, he commits, likes what he sees, and part of what he liked was how they used Pat Freiermuth the night before in the Ohio State game. So you got to keep charging forward with this, but absolutely, the Penn State is great but not yet elite comment. Spoke with some commits this week in a story I put up on The Athletic, and they said, yeah, we know that message was for us. Like, we understood that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because if fans were watching that, you could see Franklin glance upstairs, and of course that's where all the recruits were watching.
Yeah, and there's a lot more of this season that the recruits can continue to watch, and there's some more Blue-White Tailgate for you guys as well. So Audrey, thanks for coming on, and we've got more Blue-White Tailgate after this.
Well, welcome back. Our final segment as the gang reconvenes here on the set. All right, so we get to one of our favorites, the good, the bad, and me. Oh, sorry. All right, so let's get to the good. Todd Sadowski.
I will take that. And my good is the present and immediate future of Penn State's football season. And did you notice how close they are to Ohio State in roster, in speed and strength, and the way that they're playing them the last 3 years, especially the last two? Coulda, shoulda in Columbus, coulda, shoulda at Beaver Stadium. Urban Meyer knows what he's doing, and that's an elite program, and Penn State is right there. Everything's still in front of them. Yes, some things have to fall their way, but if they keep picking off their opponents one at a time, good things wait at the end of the season.
I'm going to go with the bad, and in Pittsburgh this weekend there was a shooting at a youth football game, and according to the reports, some of it had to do with a relative of one of the kids not getting the kind of playing time, and I think if that's not a warning sign as to where youth sports are in this country, there is none, because that has no place. Let kids play, stay out of it.
The ugly, by the way, for me, goes actually to basketball, because the trial is now underway with all the FBI investigation that took place last week, and it's showing, quote, the seedy side of sports, where now they're naming even more names and schools along the way. That's going to get worse before it gets better. Now, will it make the sport better? We'll see. But it's actually a basketball. That's going to be an interesting 6 weeks of trial, including a key player that was going to go to Louisville but did not, and is now playing in Australia. All right, so let's get to the picks. Here we go. The picks. I get to go first. I get Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. When the season began, I did not like Virginia Tech's team. And so when I had the first pick, I picked Florida State. Now I found out that Florida State's very bad, and Virginia Tech's not very good. I think Notre Dame is good. I mean, defensively, they're really good. I think Book helps them. Quarterback, I go with Notre Dame.
I got LSU and Florida, and defense travels. And boy, the Tigers have some defense, and I just don't trust the Gators. They're ranked 22nd. I'm not so sure that team's very good. LSU, offensively, limited, but I think they have enough defense to beat the Gators.
Limited. I like that's a kind word.
Limited. Yes.
Limited.
I've got the Red River shootout, showdown, rivalry, whatever they call it now, based on their corporate sponsor. Texas and Oklahoma play in Dallas, and it is I went to this game last year. It's a great environment. It's a lot of fun. State Fair, Texas. The food is ridiculously good. I think I gained 12 pounds. But that being said, I think Texas is closing the gap. I don't think they have quite enough yet to catch Oklahoma, but don't be surprised if they do. But I think Oklahoma wins this one close.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the fun teams in the country so far has been Kentucky. They've got Texas A&M. So what do you have, Josh?
Benny Snell's been having a great season so far and has put up over 100 all-purpose yards in each SEC contest. But facing Texas A&M on the road is no easy task. I like the Aggies to pull off the win at home. Steve, what are your keys this week?
Okay, my keys. All right, keys going into the bye week. I think what we've seen so far, and this is brought to you by our great friends at Aaron's. I had somebody say to me the other day, man, I love the chairs you sit in. I said, oh, yeah, I know, so do we. But the keys, Penn State's a better football team now than when we started the season. I think you've seen the growth of them each week. They continue on that upward track of growth. They can still put together a spectacular season against this schedule.
My key is for Steve, just to get rested up for his bye week. Just enjoy the bye week, Steve. Get a round of golf in, cut the grass, whatever. Get away from it all a little bit, and then come back fresh. You got a tough stretch heading into the end of the season for the Big Ten.
By the way, on the bye week, we are expecting grandchild 5 this weekend.
Oh, there you
okay,
go.
so
That's
they're
well
okay.
timed.
Yes.
Okay,
That is well timed.
Yes. No, the Jones family gets it.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick key. I think the next 5 games are going to be the key this season. You come out of these things, you win all 5 of them, you're probably heading to the playoff. But you could win all 5 of them, you could lose 3 or 4 of them. So I think that's going to be the key. And the defensive growth is going to be critical in those 5 weeks.
See, and I've always looked at the schedule as one of opportunity. Last year when they lost to Michigan State, they had Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland. There's no way to make up for anything.
Right.
This schedule affords that opportunity. And we'll have the opportunity to be back with you next week on Blue White Tailgate.